Want to grow your own fresh vegetables at home? Like, share, and subscribe to Grow Your Own Vegetables for simple gardening tips.
Basically, she took that compost and she added it to her garden where the tomatoes were, and the tomatoes had been producing fruit, and then suddenly they started growing vines, lots of them, instead of tomatoes. Any idea why? Yeah, I have an idea why. So we talked about this, 1 part greens to 2 part browns, that your food scraps, your veggies, and your fruits, those are things that are very nitrogen rich, and the browns are what bring in a lot of carbon. And this rule of thumb, to achieve 25 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, you're trying to get more browns, which means that you had a very, very nitrogen rich fertilizer that you, if it was fully composted, that you put potentially out on your tomatoes. So that's one thing that may have happened. And what happens when you put nitrogen on a plant is that it supports leaf growth first. So she showed us a picture of what that looked like. This is pretty epic. It's pretty beautiful. Looks like a lot of vines all growing together there. And let's see, they started growing out of control. I've thinned barrel loads of vines off these, and they just keep growing. As usual, they stop producing in the heat of the summer. But now that it's fall, the cherry tomatoes have started producing, but not the better boys that did so well in the spring. Okay, so a couple of things that may have happened. So tomatoes, we talked about the nitrogen, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. The other thing that may have happened, Sue was mentioning that tomatoes stop producing at a certain temperature. So typically when temperatures are above 85 degrees regularly, the blossoms will start to drop off the vine, and you'll just be left with greenery. And then what happens is that it takes a while for let's say now the plant, it starts to get cooler in the fall, and maybe her temperatures have dropped below that line, and now the blossoms aren't dropping. It takes a good 20 to 30 days for blossoms to become green fruit, and then it takes another 20 or 30 days for those green fruit to become ripened, I should say mature green, meaning that they're ready to turn. And it takes even longer for them to fully mature into the red tomato or whatever color we're looking for. So the time that it takes from when the temperatures start to drop below that heat zone to the time when you might get a better boy is probably 2 months, I would say. That would be my guess. So if you experience some really high temperatures, you might start to see those better boys coming in at some point. Now, the thinning of the vines was a good idea. I think that's a great idea. Look for the vines that don't, where maybe the blossoms were dropped off of them. There's no blossoms, no flowers, and just cut them all off. You don't need any of that stuff, right? And so just a quick overview, there are 3 main nutrients in your soil, and then there's a whole host of micronutrients, macronutrients, and trace nutrients. So the 3 main nutrients that people talk about often are NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So that's when you see a bag at the store and it says 30, 0, 0. That would mean it's like 30 parts nitrogen to 0 parts phosphorus to 0 parts potassium. So with the nitrogen, here you see it's all about that strong leaf growth, that dark green color. So I think your compost probably was heavily nitrogen based, and you want to get more other matter in there. And then phosphorus is what supports roots, and then also that fruit growth, that seed formation. Now, you don't necessarily want to go out there and dump phosphorus on your crops to just produce more fruit. I would go for a more balanced approach and try to create a balanced compost so that everything is there when the plant needs it. And then potassium is really kind of everything. It's disease and stress resistance, it's flavor, it's color, it's plant vigor. So it kind of helps in all realms, all right? But I'm guessing you probably had a really rich nitrogen-based compost, and that's what happened. And for those of you, we talked about soil earlier. Your next step, if you're new to gardening and you've maybe done a round of crops, you've tried to grow, and you've grown root vegetables and greens, and now it's like, okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this stuff. It's probably time at some point when things start to look wonky, it might be time to get a soil test. And what you can do with a soil test is look for all the different trace nutrients that those vegetables want. And here's a list of all those vegetables and all the different roles that the different nutrients have for the plant. And so what happens is if the plant doesn't have one of these macronutrients, micronutrients, or trace elements, is that they start to turn funny colors because some kind of plant function is not happening. So I mentioned this in the 40-day garden challenge, that if your leaves all start changing color, that's some sort of soil deficiency. And so some different examples of those deficiencies, it might mean that you get yellowing, it might mean that you get veining, it might mean that you get white edges, it might mean that you get purple leaves. All of these different things are possibilities. And so that's something to consider. Now, the other thing I just wanted to say is, so my hypothesis here is that Sue had this nitrogen-rich compost. It produced a whole bunch of vines. There's one other thing that could have happened, but I'm guessing because the rest of her garden is maybe doing well that this may not be the case. But it's possible with soil, so this is another thing about soil to start to understand. I know if you're just getting started, this can be overwhelming. There's a lot to learn about soil. The ideal pH for vegetables is somewhere around 6.8, and the reason we say that, it's a rule of thumb, and some vegetables like a soil that's more acidic and some like a soil more basic. But the reason that we like that line is that look down this chart, and what you'll see is that all the different nutrients that you need are kind of maximized at that 6.8. And so that's the ideal place where the plant makes these nutrients available. So let's say, Sue, your pH was a 6. Take a look where that would put you on this chart. I don't have a line that shows it, but it would not, your soil at a low pH would not take up phosphorus the same way. And so if all of your crops were exploding with green and they weren't producing fruit, you might look at your soil pH and say, okay, well, maybe I'm not getting the phosphorus I need. You might, it's a possibility that there might not be phosphorus present, but the other idea is that phosphorus might be present, but it's not being taken up by the plant. It's not available because the pH is not where it needs to be. So if this is a new concept to you, this might just blow your mind. The first time I saw this graphed out, I was like, oh, I see how that works. And if you're kind of fuzzy on this, I totally get that too. So hopefully that helps. And I know Sue has some experience, so I think she's gonna get the concepts that I'm talking about here. So you might decide, Sue, that it's time for some sort of soil test. And usually a soil test will come with, here's the targeted ranges of what we want those micronutrients and macronutrients to be, and then, a target area, and then like, where are you doing well, where do you have too much, where do you have too little, and you can start to see connections between what's happening with your plant and what's happening in your soil. And that's when you start to really become a garden geek because you're thinking about your soil. Now, with your tomato plants, what you can do, and it sounds like you already started cutting away a lot of the greenery. That's awesome. Commercial growers a lot of times will remove all the lower greenery in order to send more energy towards the fruiting component of the plant. So that's something you can do, right? And if you're doing this in your garden, it might look more like it's in a cage like this. Just be careful. For those of you in hot climates like Sue, if you're in the desert, you can scald your fruit if it sees too much sun. So you might want to have like just a little bit of shadow and dappled light on those fruits, and just, instead of this image where it's like the greenery is all gone, basically this idea where the greenery is right above the fruit. So those are some ideas for you about what happened with the tomatoes. And I know what it's like to have out of control vines. It's so frustrating because it looks like the plant is huge, but at the same time, what you want is the fruit, and you're not seeing the fruit. So take a look to see all the vines that don't have the setting fruit from the heat from the past. Just cut them down, get rid of them, and prune them back so that you have just the parts that are setting fruit now that it's cooling off. All right, so I hope that helps. And I don't know that you're going to be able to adjust right away to that swing of a lot of nitrogen. I don't typically think it's a good idea to see a swing like that and then try to adjust it a different way and like throw a bunch of phosphorus at it, because what's going to happen in the long run is you're just going to end up with these weird out of sync relationships between all the nutrients. So in the future, I would just work towards a more full spectrum compost and get those browns in there too.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And for more simple and practical gardening tips, subscribe to Grow Your Own Vegetables. For more tips and updates, visit gyov.org and join our growing community.